October 17, 1943, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. It was 2:47 in the morning when the mess kit began to shake in his hands. The German prisoner stared down at the tray as if it were some kind of illusion. Scrambled eggs, bacon, thick white bread with butter melting into it, coffee that smelled rich and dark, with sugar and cream beside it. For 3 years in the Africa Corps, food had meant sawdust bread and bitter substitutes. Now, at 128 pounds, hollowed out by war and desert, he was looking at more food than he had seen in months. Later he would write simply, "When I was captured, I weighed 128 pounds. After 2 years as an American prisoner, I weighed 185. I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes." That 57-pound transformation would not be unique. It would be repeated thousands of times across the United States during World War II, as more than 425,000 German prisoners lived in American camps. While their comrades on the Eastern Front survived on frozen horse meat and civilians at home starved, these prisoners ate like American soldiers. What they experienced would reshape not only their bodies, but their understanding of power, democracy, and the country they had been taught to hate. The collapse had begun months earlier, in North Africa. When Axis forces surrendered in Tunisia in May 1943, American medical officers were stunned by what they found. These were supposed to be elite Wehrmacht troops. Instead, they were biological wrecks. Supply lines had failed, the desert had consumed them, and the official field rations existed only on paper. By late 1942, many soldiers were receiving a fraction of what they were meant to eat. Hard bread, when it existed, was often replaced by weevil-infested hardtack. Coffee was brewed from roasted acorns and sweetened with saccharin. Meat, usually horse or mule, was stretched with sawdust filler. Dehydrated vegetables filled stomachs without nourishing bodies. At the Oren Processing Center, U.S. Army Dr. James Patterson documented what he saw. Scurvy, night blindness, protein edema, men whose immune systems were collapsing. The recovery began the moment they were loaded onto Liberty ships bound for America. These ships, built faster than anything the Germans could imagine, carried tens of thousands of prisoners each month. The first meal at sea, beef stew, potatoes, white bread, butter, real coffee with milk, contained more calories than many prisoners had eaten in an entire week in Africa. Some vomited. Their bodies, unused to fat and protein, rebelled. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison Matthews watched them bored. Hollow cheeks, protruding ribs, men who could barely climb the gangplanks. "We had to feed them carefully," he wrote. Their systems couldn't handle normal food immediately. Yet normal food was exactly what awaited them, because American policy was explicit. Under the 1929 Geneva Convention, prisoners were to receive rations equal in quality and quantity to depot troops. For the United States, this was more than legal compliance. It was strategy. Every well-fed German prisoner, one memo explained, is insurance for American prisoners in German hands. The bureaucracy behind it was immense. The Office of the Provost Marshal General tracked calories, menus, medical exams, and weight changes. Swiss inspectors and Red Cross delegates visited camps. Forms were filed relentlessly. And the food kept coming. Meat, bread, potatoes, cheese, butter, milk, vegetables, fruit. Unlimited real coffee. 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day, sometimes more. Prisoners could buy cigarettes, chocolate, beer, even ice cream with camp scrip earned from labor. America was feeding its enemies better than Germany was feeding its own soldiers. The effects were astonishing. Weight piled on. Muscles returned. Vitamin deficiencies vanished. One prisoner after another recorded gains of 40, 50, 60 pounds. Georg Gartner, a sergeant captured in Tunisia, would later become famous as Hitler's last soldier in America after escaping in 1945 and hiding for decades. Even he admitted in his memoir that prisoners were stunned by how well they were treated, almost embarrassed by the abundance. Chaplains noticed it too. At Camp Algona, Iowa, one wrote that the prisoners were positively impressed by the United States, their hostility softening into reluctant respect. Repatriation officers after the war would later report shock when families expected skeletons and instead received men who looked prosperous, healthy, almost wealthy. The camps themselves felt unreal to many prisoners. Camp Concordia, Kansas, spread across hundreds of acres, built in 90 days, with electricity, hot water, flush toilets, central heating. For men from rural Germany, used to oil lamps and outhouses, it felt like the future. Educational programs flourished. Kitchens ran non-stop, powered by industrial equipment they had never seen. Camp Hearn, Texas, nicknamed the Fritz Ritz, fed thousands daily from central bakeries. Prisoners recreated regional German dishes using American ingredients unavailable back home. Commanders discovered that calories produced cooperation. Discipline problems dropped. Weight gain soared. At Camp Aliceville, Alabama, skeletal arrivals were placed on graduated feeding plans. Medical officers tracked recovery with clinical precision. One man arrived at 109 pounds and left at 181. Within months, gaunt faces filled out, chronic illnesses disappeared, and energy returned. In Arizona's Papago Park, naval prisoners lounged in a desert camp so comfortable that escape attempts bordered on absurd. When 25 U-boat officers tunneled out in 1944, planning to float down the Salt River, they discovered the river was dry. Hunger drove them to surrender. Back home, Americans noticed and resented it. Civilians lived under rationing while prisoners ate meat daily. Letters poured into Congress. Mothers asked how German prisoners could eat steak while their sons fought overseas. The government answered with one word: reciprocity. Treat them well, and American prisoners would be treated well in return. Still, bitterness lingered, especially when prisoners worked local farms and ate better than the farmers themselves. For black American soldiers, the irony cut deeper. German prisoners could sit in restaurants where they were barred. One soldier wrote bitterly about watching Nazis served at a Texas cafe while he, in uniform, was sent to the back door. Even some German prisoners felt uneasy, publishing editorials questioning American segregation. They benefited from a system that denied equality to some of its own citizens. The labor program only deepened the contrast. By 1944, hundreds of thousands of prisoners worked American farms. Farmers fed them generously, knowing hungry men worked poorly. Breakfasts of eggs and bacon. Hot lunches in the fields. Dinner back at camp. Daily intake sometimes exceeded 5,000 calories. In Nebraska, prisoners watched machines replace entire villages of labor. In California, they picked fruit freely while surplus harvests were bulldozed into pits. The waste shocked them more than the abundance. Food destroyed to stabilize prices, while Europe starved. Medical officers tracked it all. Patterns emerged. First month, digestive adjustment. Second month, rapid gains. By 6 months, most prisoners had added dozens of pounds. New problems appeared: diabetes, hypertension, gout, diseases of abundance, not deprivation. Psychologically, guilt set in. Prisoners worried about returning home visibly well-fed while families starved. Christmas 1944 crystallized the contradiction. As the Battle of the Bulge raged, American camps served feasts beyond pre-war imagination. turkey, ham, potatoes with butter and cream, pie, ice cream. Churches donated cookies and scarves. Prisoners wept, not from joy, but from shame and confusion. Enemies showed them kindness they could not refuse. Escape attempts remained rare. Why leave? Inside the wire was food, safety, and certainty. Outside was hunger, exposure, and recapture. Even the most ideological prisoners admitted it made no sense. Industry tours shattered remaining illusions. Factories produced bombers faster than Germany could train pilots. Steel mills poured out numbers that made resistance feel mathematically hopeless. This wasn't a war between armies, one prisoner wrote. It was a war between systems. When repatriation began, millions of pounds of American weight sailed back to Europe. The contrast was brutal. Healthy men returned to ruins and ration cards. Weight fell off as quickly as it had been gained. Some lost 50 pounds in months. Many shared their food with starving children, living on scraps. Yet something else remained. Education. Experience. Over 50,000 prisoners had studied democracy, economics, and law. They had watched a system criticize itself openly. They had seen prosperity without terror. Some stayed. Thousands immigrated to America. Others rebuilt Germany using what they had learned. Agricultural yields rose. Management styles changed. Relationships endured. Former enemies became allies. One American officer later wrote that the United States had purchased future peace with present food. The greatest irony of the war lay in those expanded waistlines. While their homeland starved, German prisoners thrived. Each pound gained was proof of American capacity. Not just military strength, but productive power. The ability to feed even enemies. In the end, America's most effective weapon was not its bombs or tanks, but its dinner tables, large enough, abundant enough, to transform enemies into witnesses.